Well, hey, campers. It's another beautiful day here at the Clapocalypse. You've discovered day 5 of Camp 1 Clap 2 on the 1 Clap Speech and Debate podcast, and we're in for an awesome guest today here on the podcast. Cheyenne Central assistant coach Whitney Brooks is here to help us survive in the Clapocalypse right after she drinks her coffee and plays her games, but we'll get to that. I'm your camp director and host of the 1 Clap Speech and Debate podcast, Lyle Wiley. I hope everyone is ready to face any horrors that might stand in their way, to be able to share their voices with confidence and joy this season. Quick reminder, check the 1 Clap socials for today's social media challenge. I've really loved all this engagement from competitors and coaches on all those challenges so far. You're getting me excited for the upcoming year. It's pretty great. Let's learn more about our guest on today's show, Whitney Brooks. Whitney is excited to join Camp 1 Clap for the first time this year. In her 3 years competing on the Wyoming speech and debate circuit, she became a bit of a phenomenon, racking up accomplishments including earning her quad ruby, 3 qualifications to nationals, 2 individual state championships, breaks at multiple national level tournaments, and the greatest achievement of all, perfecting the Just Dance routine for Rasputin. She has now coached for the past 2 years at Cheyenne Central, earning her first Coaching Excellence Award and coaching many national qualifiers, state champions, and all-around awesome people along the way. Whitney is a zealous fan of Diet Coke, crusty little rat dogs, the mountains, and all things Chapel Roan. Although she possesses very few practical skills to avoid an apocalypse, she sure has a lot of heart. So feel free to follow Whitney along as she navigates the world at genuineknockoff.substack.com. That's genuine knockoff at Substack. Her writing is great. You should totally check it out. All right. I think it's time to jump right into my interview with Whitney Brooks. Welcome to Camp 1 Clap 2, the Clapocalypse. Whitney Brooks, welcome back, actually. Welcome back to 1 Clap. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
I'm glad you're here because you can help us navigate the Clapocalypse, which is a really scary thing that we're all trying to figure out what it even is, actually. And first thing we're going to do is talk about fears. What's your favorite scary story? It could be like a movie or a book or a spoken story, like a campfire story. It could be anything. What's your favorite scary story?
So just as a bit of background, as a kid, I was such a scaredy cat. I did not interact at all with horror or scary stories or anything. And then just in the past couple of years, I've started to kind of get into it. So the impetus for that was actually Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which is objectively not that scary. But I started watching it in high school because I was going through this phase of 90s, early 2000s trashy TV, and I loved it. So then I started kind of getting more into horror. So my favorite one that I've watched recently is Midsummer. I finally watched it after people telling me forever that I needed to, and it was really good. I really liked it. I know lots of people have lots of thoughts on it, but I enjoyed it. But I also love anything by Shirley Jackson, all of her novels and short stories, really phenomenal. But yeah, I mean, any scary story in the right environment, I think is the key part of it. You got to be by a campfire, got some marshmallows, got some spooky lighting. That's the perfect scary story right there.
That's some good stuff. Buffy is I want to say underrated, but I don't know if that's that pretty popular, right? Buffy's always been pretty popular, but but still sort of underrated as a pop sort of vampire TV show, because I took a vampires class in my master's program, and we talked about Buffy a lot, and I think that Buffy has a lot more interesting stuff going on than people give it credit for.
Yeah, it has some good stuff. Joss Whedon knew what he was doing.
Yeah, it's intriguing. And then Midsummer is a really good, a really beautiful movie in a weird way. I love some of Astor's transitions, especially. A lot of folks have talked about that movie on the podcast, so I know it's a favorite out there.
Cool.
But yeah, We Have Always Lived in the Castle is really great.
Yes.
Shirley Jackson. Yes. Very spooky story there.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So some good choices. I like your choices. Yeah. I am interested to hear about your thoughts on how long you might last after like some sort of post-apocalyptic situation where we have some sort of event like a zombie apocalypse or something. Do you feel like you would be a survivor on a scale of 1 to 10? How good of a chance of survival do you think you might have? Do you have any skills that you bring to the table here?
So I'm not sure about skills, but I do have like some just kind of by sheer dumb luck. I think I have a pretty good shot because somehow magically my grandfather managed to keep a hold of his grandparents' homestead, like out
Mm.
in the middle of nowhere in Wyoming. And so there's like 1,500 acres, which is just a beautiful gift for my family to be able to hold on to that. But there's nothing out there. It's like 25-minute drive to the nearest neighbors. So I think if I just popped over there, like I just kind of lived off the land, like I think I would have a pretty good shot of just kind of avoiding everything. I don't think I have the skills to like fight back, but I think my flight response could be pretty strong there. And my grandfather stockpiled canned food, and so there's like 40 years worth of chili up there, which
Oh
I
my
could live off
gosh.
of for a while in the apocalypse. So,
It's like going to destroy your digestive system, but
oh
like
yeah,
you
oh
might
yeah.
make it a long time. That sounds like a pretty like decent survival sort of situation. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah, I
So
know.
so you have like survival skills, but in terms of like conflict, if it got scary and you had to like try to like fight folks or whatever, not probably.
Yeah,
No.
probably not ending well for me.
Let's just hope it never comes to that.
Yeah, exactly. Let's just
Yeah.
forget it. Just don't think about it.
Most of the speech and debate folks I've talked to don't feel great about their chances of survival. Many have said, well, I have communication skills, like maybe I could talk my way out of it or whatever. But yeah, not. I'm just hoping that maybe we can use our communication skills to help prevent it from happening. Hopefully, let's hope that.
Yes, yeah. Let's be a little more proactive, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so I think maybe we've talked about this a little bit before in the past, Whitney, but I want to hear a little bit about your speech and debate origin story. How'd you get started in this world? Why'd you stick around?
Yeah. So I was a little bit of a later joiner. I didn't join right off the bat when I got to high school. But when I first started high school, I was really involved in theater. So I was doing all the shows at my school my freshman year. And at that point in time, the theater director was also the speech and debate coach. So the fall of my sophomore year, I was the lead in this like school play. It was a super heavy play. If you've ever heard of A Monster Calls by Siobhan Dowd, that's what we were doing. Yeah, very intense for like 15-year-olds. But my theater director slash speech and debate coach was like, "Hey, you're doing pretty well with this. Come be a humor kid on my speech team." So I joined the team. There was a lot of overlap with the kids between theater and speech. So I already had some friends involved in it. And I joined and I kind of never looked back. And then, only then, did I realize that my mom had been in speech and debate for a while when she was in high school. She absolutely loved it. And I don't know how I'd never heard of that before, but then I learned about it and she did extemp. So I was like, I guess I'll do extemp now. And yeah, then I kind of bounced around all the events doing this and that. And I just really loved it. And as I was graduating high school, one of our assistant coaches was on the way out. She had some like life changes and had to move to a different place. And my head coach was like, I guess you could give this a shot. And I was like, sure, I'll try it. And found out that I loved coaching even more than I loved competing. So I've been around ever since, I guess.
Just kind of trapped you and never let go, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
So your coaching situation, you've been going to school at the University of Wyoming Laramie, right? And then helping coach at Cheyenne Central. So
Yes.
so a lot of like commuting kind of things for you.
Yes, a lot of driving,
Mm.
which has benefits and its drawbacks. I mean, I have become such a podcast girl, so I love having my little time, listen to my little podcasts. listen to some audiobooks, like just get some me time when I'm on the
Mm-hmm.
road. But in the winter, it's not always the most fun, for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of stressful to drive on spooky roads. But what are some of your favorite podcasts? What are some of the ones you like to listen to?
I lately have been listening to Rehash, which is like these two random girls that yap about pop culture phenomena that we all kind of forgot about that they want to revisit. I really like that one. Stuff You're Wrong About is a pretty good one that I've been enjoying. I'm kind of all over the place. I'll listen to like one episode of a million different podcasts if I'm interested in the topic. So,
Well, that's cool. Yeah, that's
and
cool.
of course, One Clap.
Well,
Sorry, that one was implied.
Yeah, everyone. I would assume that if you're a human and listen to content, then you're listening to One Clap. I'm sure.
Exactly.
I was
Number
going to
one
ask
on the charts.
if you're into podcasts. Have you ever thought about like starting your own podcast, Whitney? Because I would totally listen to this.
I mean, I have certainly thought about it. I am a prolific yapper. And I think I could put those skills to use maybe, but I just don't know like what I would talk about, or finding your niche is kind of difficult. So I think I'm waiting to really find something where I feel like I could just go.
Yeah, you're kind of a good example of someone who has like just an explosion of interests, because you have a lot of like interests and you kind of go deep on a lot of them, right? Because you're really into music, right? You're a big music person, you're a big speech and debate person, but then your areas of study, you really deep dive in those as well. You like to write. You have a lot of interests.
Yeah, I'm kind of all over the place, but I think sometimes that's the way to do it.
Yeah, no, I think that's beautiful. But I guess when you think about a focused podcast, it might get kind of tricky to figure out what that looks like.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you like film too? Are you a movie buff?
Sometimes. I mean, I love watching movies and thinking about them and talking about them, but that's kind of more of a recent development. So, I mean, I'm missing some of the classics and I'm starting to work my way through them. I think I'm probably just never going to watch Pulp Fiction because everybody that recommends it to me is like super obnoxious about it. Maybe that's just my experience. But some of the other ones I'm working my way through,
It is funny how film aficionados do kind of have this like weird, like, oh, you have to see this film or else you're not a true film buff or whatever, So
see what's really great about The Godfather,
Yeah, full disclosure, I do think Apocalypse Now is maybe one of the greatest movies ever, but the Godfather movies, I don't know, like the gangster stuff, I know technically they're great or whatever, but it's just kind of painful for me. Not really my bag.
Yeah, and that that's okay.
I hope so. Thanks for the affirmation, Whitney. I appreciate that.
Of course. I'm here to be your yes man today.
Yes, I like it. So we've already gone over some of this ground, but of course you were a great competitor at Cheyenne Central, especially like, a state champion in oratory twice.
State champ once in oratory, once in drama.
Drama, that's right. Yeah.
Which I forget about sometimes because I only did drama for like that year, and then I kind of dipped out.
The drama dip, the famous drama dip. Yeah. Drama's lovely, but also heavy. So, so 2-time state champion at Cheyenne Central High School. Pretty amazing. Yeah. Were you part of the state championship team as well? You were, right?
I was. That was my senior year. So I was, pretty happy to be part of that as like team president.
Yeah, lovely way to go out, honestly. Yeah, you were team president, and now you're coaching, of course, and we talked about that. But that is not an easy transition, and it's got some challenges to go from team captain / team president to coaching. I mean, I know there's overlap, but like that's a big step with a lot of moving pieces. And you've also coached 2 years now through a coaching change, and so you've had some really unique challenges, I think. And I just think it'd be interesting to talk to you about some of those challenges of coming back to coach with a team that you're familiar with, and then what you enjoy about coaching so far, but maybe some of the things that you've had to figure out in order to enjoy coaching, and what you like to coach right now. I know you're coaching a lot of different events, but what you coach and what you enjoy. So yeah, I'll just give you some time to chat about your coaching experience.
Yeah, for sure. I love talking about this. All of my friends at college are so sick of hearing about speech and debate all the time. They're like, we get it, dude. Leave us alone. But yeah, I mean, for me, like I came back to coach immediately the fall right after I graduated, which is not something that my school had really done before. In the past, there was kind of a waiting period of like, hey, get at least 1 or 2 years out and then come back when you've got a little more distance. But I was kind of the only person that was interested. And so they were like, I guess you're going to go for it. And I don't know if I would recommend that path for everybody because, I mean, there were a lot of challenges. There's a lot of boundary setting that has to happen kind of right off the gate in a way that maybe older, more experienced coaches wouldn't have to do, because there is that kind of awkward thing of like, we used to be teammates and now we're transitioning into this relationship of like coach and student. And there are new things that have to come along with that. Like, what are the rules about social media, or like people that already have your phone number? And like, what do we talk about even outside of practice, in practice? Like, how does all of this work? And figuring all of that out while also trying to figure out just the basics of like, how do I coach these things? It's definitely a lot. With that being said, I think it was a really great experience for me. I don't regret doing it. I don't know if I would recommend it for everybody, but I don't regret it. And I think that I learned a lot about myself. I gained a lot of skills that I don't think I would have gained otherwise. I mean, I definitely have had to kind of learn to ride the line between learning how to gain respect and authority without kind of going off the deep end of like authoritarianism, which is a really important skill to have for any leader. And I kind of had to learn that in an interesting way, being kind of thrown into the deep end. And then also a challenge that you wouldn't necessarily expect is to kind of, there's a lot of resetting your expectations that you have to go through, because as a competitor, I mean, I'm not that far out from it. I remember what it's like. Your coaches do something that you don't love, and you're like, oh, well, if I was the coach, I would do it this way, and everything would be perfect, and there would be no problems, and I understand everything completely. And it's really easy to think that when you're not in that position. And then you kind of take over as the coach, and you have to do a lot of like, okay, maybe this isn't as easy as I thought it was. Some of these changes are harder to implement or impossible to implement given all of the restrictions that exist out there. And so there's definitely a lot of like, you go into it thinking that you have this experience and you're going to have it all figured out, and then you don't, which is a lesson everybody has to learn eventually. But I just had to learn that kind of right away. As for other challenges, I mean, this is kind of a silly one, but my first year coaching, I got mistaken for a competitor at like every tournament, at least once or twice, which I just think is, now I think it's kind of funny, but at the time I used to get kind of annoyed by it because I was like, I'm not even wearing a suit, dude. Like, but yeah, maybe that's just me.
Did you ever have a hard time getting into like the hospitality rooms and stuff? Like people are like, hey, this is just for coaches.
You know, that actually did happen to me once. My first year coaching at districts. I think it was mostly just me. I was too scared that they were going to kick me out. So the first couple times I went in there, I made my head coach at the time go in with me so that everybody was like, oh, she's fine. And then I would kind of like say hi to the coaches I knew. People were like, oh, there we go. Like, we get what's happening here. But I was very aware of constantly having like an ID badge or some sort of identification on me almost all the time that proved that I was not just a high schooler wandering around the halls of this high school, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You're probably going to have to deal with this for a while, honestly. So,
Yeah, probably. My outfit game has gotten a lot stronger though. So I think that helps. I've got like the coaching outfits kind of down. Turns out puffer vests, that's the secret.
everybody's like,
So,
oh, they're wearing a puffer vest. They've got to be a coach.
yep, that's just like the coach fit apparently. So it's worked out well for me.
It's a good trick. It's people listening should that'll help them out.
Yeah.
What's been the thing, like, what do you love most about coaching, or like what is the most enjoyable part for you?
Yeah. For me, I think just the whole experience of getting to like mentor and teach, that's just something that I've discovered for myself I really love, that I didn't think I would love as much as I did. And I mean, I tell my students this all the time, like, we care about them as competitors, yes, but we care about them as people and as human beings first. And so for me, getting to be able to kind of be that person in their lives where they're like, how do I register for my classes? How do I like apply to college? Hey, can you read over my scholarship essay? Like those little things, even outside of just speech and debate coaching, have been some of the most rewarding things for me. Just getting to kind of be that person that someone can turn to and be like, what am I doing with my life? And being able to tell them, like, hey, everybody is wondering that. Nobody knows the answer. Like, it's okay. Take a deep breath. I really love that. And then something that actually was originally kind of a challenge that has turned out to be one of my favorite parts is kind of learning to take a step back. I think that as competitors, I mean, there's a lot of this like external validation that's going on, right? You're getting feedback all the time. I mean, if you're doing well, you're getting like big, shiny trophies that you get to take home and show your parents and be like, these are awesome. And then you start coaching, and it's a lot less of that. And at first, I mean, it was kind of a difficult transition for me just because I was like, am I doing well? Like, nobody's telling me that I'm doing well. So therefore, I must not be doing well. And it's realizing that it's more about like the internal validation of, I'm at a practice and a student is like struggling with something. And then we kind of work through it. And I'm like, okay, these are the moments where like, that's how I find out I'm doing well, is like seeing these students do well. And so learning to kind of not take that credit for yourself and like acknowledging that this is about them now. At first, that was one of those kind of tricky transitions for me, but I actually really love it. Just getting to like be at an awards ceremony and like my students make fun of me because I'm a little emotional sometimes, and like at districts and state I'm always a little teary-eyed, and I'm like, I'm just so proud of you guys. But like that really is the awesome moments for me, is like when that kid that has had a really tough season finally breaks into finals and gets to stand up on that stage. I'm always just like, oh my goodness.
Oh yeah, those are lovely moments.
Yeah.
Yeah, validation is it's a very difficult thing for teachers and coaches to once you step away from the role of competitor into the coaching spot. It is difficult to figure out how to feel validated, which probably requires a lot of like really clear like confidence in yourself, loving yourself, feeling good about yourself in a general sense, because the hard thing about kids is that they're lovely, but they're not going to give you validation for almost anything. Like it's just not really the way it works. Like yeah. But it's also, you got a chance to work with some cool other coaches. Sounds like you got to do some debate coaching and stuff. Maybe some events that you're familiar with, but maybe not like as confident in or whatever. But like, what was that like to do events that you maybe weren't as like confident in?
Yeah, I coached at least a little bit of basically everything this year. My team doesn't do policy, but we do every other event. And so I was helping out at least a little bit with every other event. And it was really a lot of fun for me. I mean, it was a lot of growth as a person and as a teacher, as a coach, because my first year coaching, I was just doing the platform stuff and a little bit of Congress, uh, maybe a lot of bit of Congress. But like that was kind of my niche my first year. And so I competed in Interp and Congress and then like a tiny little bit of debate when I was in high school, but I had kind of stepped away from that for a little bit. So it was really fun this year actually to kind of step back into the world of Interp a little bit more and like getting to block things out again and work on characterization and like I love the creative aspects of Interp where I can be like, hey, hold on, like this would be really funny if we did this here. And like this might be a really hard-hitting emotional moment if we do this here. And that kind of creative brainstorming, like collaborative aspect with the students was really great. Because a lot of what we do in platform is like the student writes something out and then we read it and we're like, cool, change this. I really like this. And it's a little sometimes less of that like super creative energy in the moment. So I really loved getting to do that with Interp. And then, yeah, I did a little bit of debate. I've started studying philosophy as part of my like degree plan at the university. So getting to bring some of that and chatting with my LDers about some of that has been really neat. I had a day where I just talked with all of my PFers about like logical fallacies and cognitive biases and all of those types of things that I've been learning in some of my epistemology courses. And that was really neat. Like breaking down, what even is an argument? What does it mean from like a philosophical angle? And getting to kind of approach it from that was really cool. So yeah, I've had a lot of fun this year, just kind of being all over the place and hanging out in a little bit of everything.
That's really cool that you get to share learning that you're probably excited about, stuff that you're learning in your studies. And then you get to like immediately turn around and like share while you're excited about it, while you're like, it's like fresh in your head and while you're thinking through things, like you get to share it with kids. I think starting coaching new events is very humbling.
Sometimes, yeah.
Like I started where John did with like no knowledge of anything. So my coaching experience early was very humbling, but we started a new program. So none of the kids really knew anything either. So we all just kind of got to learn together. And I kind of have sort of like taken that philosophy into my coaching for the entire time I've been coaching, where it's just like, I just try to like learn with the kids. And it sounds like you're kind of getting that experience. It's really fun.
Yes. Yeah. One of the things I struggled with the most this year was books, because I did Interp, like I had competed in Interp, but never in poi or poetry, anything with book blocking. So like I was learning a lot from some of my kids about like, how do you even like maneuver with it, right? Because I would have an idea of like, hey, this could look really cool if you did this and this and this, but then we would have to kind of figure out together how to physically do that thing. So that was a little bit humbling for me sometimes to like drop this kid's poi book like 6 times in a row, trying to show them like my vision,
I've had those exact same moments where I'm like, why don't you do this? They're like, because I physically can't do that.
Yeah.
Like that's not actually possible, dude. Like, oh yeah, you're right. Like there's probably no way to do that. Okay, sorry. But yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there anything else you want to share about your coaching experience? Like what about the transitioning? I mean, for you, maybe it all is kind of like a SERP because you coached your first year right out, and then you coached this year with a new coaching staff and a kind of a brand new situation in a lot of ways. What was it like to coach in a new situation this year? What were some of the challenges that came with that? Some of the fun stuff?
Yeah. I mean, like this definitely has been a lot of transition the past few years. I mean, my seniors that graduated this past year, the class of 24, the 4-year seniors had 6 or 7 different coaches during their high school experience on a team that has 1 head coach and 2 assistant coaches at a time, right? So that's a lot of turnover that they had to deal with. And this year I was the only coach that had stuck around from last year. So there was definitely a lot of challenges, but something I really relied on was kind of developing my own personal coaching philosophy. And, when there were tough moments, when there were challenges, kind of being able to return to that. So something that I learned from my head coach when I competed at my first year coaching, who has a complex legacy, but who taught me a lot, something he always said was he had a 2-step plan. So the first question he asked himself when he had to make a big decision was, what is best for the students involved? Not for me, not for, the standing or reputation of my team, but just what do these students need in this moment? And, when you're evaluating the choice you want to make, if the answer is that it is what's best for those students, then you move on to step number 2. And the second question is, does it follow the rules? And if the answer is yes, then you're good to go. And if the answer is no, then refer back to part number 1. And if it's what's best for the kids, then, oh well, figure out a way. And that had its merits. Sometimes it got us into sticky situations, but I really liked taking that to kind of form my own beliefs on everything. And that really helped me in terms of viewing my coaching as what matters here is these students. And I'm not going to do what's best for me. I'm not going to do what makes me look like the perfect coach. I'm going to do what they need in this moment, or what I think would be best for them, or what they think would be best for them. Sometimes it's a matter of listening to them and just straight up asking, what do you want out of this? And I'm going to do the best that I can to get you that. So I think that was something that was really helpful during kind of tumultuous transitional times, is what are my values as a coach? And then throughout any hard moments, just returning to those and making sure that whatever you're doing aligns with those values. I mean, that's just going to take you where you need to be, I think. But I mean, there was also a lot of fun. I mean, there's a lot of fun in getting to work with new people and getting to learn different coaching styles and learn from each other and, learn together from the students. And there was a lot of fun. And I think overall we've all had a pretty good experience, if you ask me.
Well, that's good to hear. And I think your coaching philosophy that you're kind of establishing is a really healthy way to approach things. That's really cool. Do you see yourself whatever larger career that you might get involved with in the future, which I know there's a lot of different directions you could potentially go. We were talking about your studying situation and stuff, but do you think you want to try to be involved in speech and debate as a coach going forward?
I mean, I think that would be super awesome. No matter what, I don't think I'll ever be totally away from this community. I think this is something that you can try your hardest, but it just kind of follows you around. No matter what, you're going to be at a grocery store in 20 years and run into somebody that remembers debating against you. My mom still remembers her arch nemesis in extemp in the 90s on the Wyoming high school debate circuit, who I'm not going to name, but who is a public figure now. But yeah, I mean, I would love to be involved in this no matter what. It's a really great community.
Cool. Yeah, it's kind of like it's like a virus or something that gets inside you. What you can do about it.
Yeah, it's like a little parasite.
Like a healthy zombie situation,
Yeah.
Healthy one.
Mostly.
Yeah. Mostly, yeah. I think we've talked a lot about things you've learned about yourself this year, but one of the questions I've been asking people is is there something uniquely just specific to this year that you've learned about either the activity or yourself over the course of this season?
Yeah. I mean, this on a practical level, I have gotten a lot better at my tab room skills this year, because I was in that first kind of group of people. I mean, my first year competing, we were still pretty much all paper ballots. And then it was 2020 and all of a sudden everything was online. So I kind of taught myself a lot of the student side of tab room, and I was still kind of learning the coach side. So this year, I mean, I tabbed a lot at our tournament. I tabbed at a lot of random other tournaments. And that was a really cool skill that I learned. I feel a lot more confident in my tabbing ability. Um, and then on a more like interpersonal level, I think the biggest thing I learned this year was just how supportive and caring this community really is. Without getting too personal, it was a pretty difficult year for me. And it was just really incredible to see the way that this community kind of steps up and supports the people that are in it. And really just, the support and care that people showed me was really great. I mean, I wasn't able to be at the state tournament this year with my team, and just the way that they were all so understanding, and like other coaches were understanding and reaching out and keeping me in the loop without overwhelming me. Like, it was just really great. And the empathy that kind of radiates from speech and debate people is just so phenomenal. And I loved getting to really experience that this year, even if it wasn't under the best of conditions.
Yeah, that's very lovely. I also felt very uplifted and supported by this community. All that said, I think it's time for a ghostly interlude. Ooh, do you believe in ghosts? I've been asking people this in the middle of the interview. Like, are you a paranormal person? What do you think? Is there anything out there?
I'm kind of, I know this is maybe the most annoying way to respond, but I'm kind of in the middle of the road where I'm like, I mean, there's got to be something going on that we don't understand. Like, we barely even understand, like, the oceans. There's no way we understand, like, what happens when we die. You know what I mean? So there's got to be something going on, but I don't know if it's, like, the ghosts that we see in, like, media and whatnot. I want to believe there's something silly and spooky out there, but I don't know exactly what it is or what form it takes.
Yeah, that's fair. Pretty measured response.
We all want to believe.
Yeah. And that's part of what we're like talking about here at camp is like overcoming fears and obstacles. And I want to hear, do you have any like examples or stories of times that you had a spooky or scary time in speech that like helped you grow through something or learn something important? I bet you probably do.
Yeah. I mean, I've had some very interesting times with speech and debate. I mean, speech and debate has just been such a big part of my life for so many years that it's kind of like big moments in speech and debate are big moments in my life and vice versa. So, I mean, like I said, my first year competing was before COVID in the before times, when we were still on paper, still in person, everything, it's quote unquote normal. And then I was supposed to go to state that year. That was my first time going to Nats. And all of a sudden, none of that was happening the way that we thought it would. We didn't even, I mean, there was kind of a mini state that was kind of thrown together, which was really great that the state got together and still kind of did something. But, for all intents and purposes, I missed my first state. And then my first Nats was online, which thankfully sort of, I was competing in extemp that year, so I still got to do something like live in the moment and feel like I was, doing nationals. But it was like I was just sitting in front of my laptop at my dining room table at home, which was maybe a little bit anticlimactic for my first nationals experience. And then the next year, I mean, almost everything was online. District, state, Nats, once again. I did have a kind of silly experience that year where my Wi-Fi cut out in the middle of drama semifinals at state, and I was losing my mind because I was like in the middle of performing, and then all of a sudden everything just went down, and I was like, oh no, like this is the end of it for me, like this is the end of my life, as a high schooler does. And then the Wi-Fi at the school turned back on and I finished my performance and it was fine. But that was, it was pretty scary in the moment. But just like that time of having to like go from being in person to online and then back in person was really scary. I don't know if anybody else has really talked about this, but I was absolutely terrified to go back in person after I'd been online for a couple of years. My first time doing my oratory in person, I guess ever, because I started doing oratory when we were online was at districts my senior year. And so that was a terrifying experience for me. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, blah, blah, blah. And in those moments where I was kind of adapting to these new situations, just kind of being able to remind myself, like, your body and your mind just have this amazing capability of like taking care of you in moments when you don't know if they will, and kind of relying on that almost muscle memory or just that routine of like, what you're doing, you've done it before, even if you haven't, like you have those baseline skills that are going to carry you through. Like that was something that became really important to me as we were kind of back and forth and there was all that uncertainty, was just like, take a deep breath, like just trust yourself and you're going to carry yourself through this one way or the other. And I mean, even in my hard moments in speech and debate, this is my own little thing. And if any of my students are listening to this podcast, they're going to be like, oh my God, she's talking about her coffee again. But my thing that I talk about all the time is that I'm a big coffee drinker, and every morning it's kind of ritualistic for me. I drink my cup of coffee and I play my silly little games. I do like the New York Times connections. That was my favorite. Sometimes I'll do the Wordle or whatever. And this is like a big thing for me. Like every morning, this is what I do. And so when I have those hard moments, something I've learned to do is tell myself, like, no matter what happens today, no matter whether I, win or I don't break, or, this goes right or this goes wrong, no matter what happens, I'm just going to wake up in the morning and I'm going to drink my silly little coffee and I'm going to play my silly little games, and the world is going to keep on turning. And so that's something my students are probably sick of hearing me say. But whenever we have hard moments as a team or as individuals, I'm like, what are we going to do tomorrow? We're going to wake up and we're going to drink our silly little coffee, and we're just going to keep putting one foot in front of the other, because you don't really get another choice in the matter. And you're just going to keep moving forward, and the world is going to keep moving forward, and everything is going to be okay.
That's very lovely.
So,
Gonna remember that. I'll wake up, drink my silly little coffee, play my silly little games. Are you still playing Connections? Is that the game that you like to play in the morning?
Yeah, that's kind of my main one. My mom and I, ever since I moved away to college, like we maintain our connection primarily via silly little games. So every morning we will send each other our results for like the Connections or the Wordle or whatever it is. We're also friends on Duolingo, and we keep each other motivated for our Duolingo streaks, the important stuff.
The important stuff. It's lovely.
Yeah.
Are you like a hardcore coffee drinker? Like, do you have to have a certain kind of coffee, or are you kind of cool with anything?
Yeah, I'm kind of cool with anything. I did not start liking coffee until a little bit later in my life, so I'm not super pretentious about it. It's just important that it's present and highly caffeinated.
That's pretty doable. So that's, you can pretty much
a cup
make
of
that
plain
happen.
black coffee, no matter what it is, I'm cool with that.
Nice. Well, that is actually a nice little, I think that's a good way to deal with fears. I think that'll be helpful to people. I do. So tell me what's coming up for you next? Like, what are you looking forward to this year?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully coaching again. We're still waiting on all sorts of admin and everything. But yeah, I've got some exciting stuff going on this year. I'm entering my junior year at college. I'm starting a new internship with the University Foundation, doing some philanthropy, like giving work, which will be really cool. And I'm going to be doing a semester abroad in the spring. I'm going to be in the Netherlands at Utrecht University. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, that's super exciting. That'll be a great experience. There's some big stuff coming up for you this year. While you're experiencing next year, I'm sure speech and debate will be part of that. And I just like to ask people, like, what for you right now, like, what is it that you love the most about the speech and debate situation, community, team, competition, anything?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many things that I love about it. I think maybe what I love most, though, which is tough for me to pick one, is that like it really teaches you a lot of resiliency. I mean, you're put into a lot of new situations, a lot of scary situations. Ooh, clapocalypse. And you just kind of have to learn how to roll with the punches. And something that I love is it really encourages you to just keep learning and just keep moving forward. You know, there's something so beautiful about this ability that speech and debate people have to, you know, have a terrible weekend and come back on Monday and see your ballots that are like straight sixes, like harsh feedback. And instead of just, you know, kind of throwing your hands up in the air and giving up, we're just like, okay, cool. I'm going to do this again next weekend. And I'm going to do it slightly better than I did last time. And there's just something so kind of beautiful to me about that, that we can keep rolling with these punches and just keep learning and keep getting after it no matter what.
I like that. I like that. I do think this is connected to my question. I've kind of been closing interviews out with people, which is like, you know, I mean, public speaking is like pretty feared by the general public. I mean, to the point that there's surveys and stories out there about people being more afraid of public speaking than death. I mean, I think we've all heard that. Yes. Which, whether or not that's totally true, it's definitely like something that people are not, they're terrified of. They're not like cool with. So, you know, speech and debate, like we actively put ourselves in these situations where we're facing this terror. So what do you think? Why, how, and why is it worth it?
I mean, I think that the biggest thing that you get out of speech and debate is just learning how to do hard things. Like we as people are so much more capable than we think that we are. We always, you know, kind of envision these limits and these boundaries for ourselves. And most of the time, we are actually able to like totally exceed those. And we just don't even realize it because we're too afraid to put ourselves in the situation. So what I love about speech and debate is that you just kind of have to get out there and do the darn thing. Like, and if it doesn't work out, then shucks, at least I know now. But at the end of the day, like you are going to gain so much even just from trying. And it takes a lot of courage and a lot of vulnerability, which sometimes to me are synonyms, to be able to get up in front of a room of people and talk to them about something that you care about. And so just being able to do that, no matter whether you get a lot of external success and a lot of external validation or not, that is just so incredible to me. And I think that's part of why I love speech and debate so much, because it is scary and you do it anyways. And that experience in and of itself is just so amazing for you.
That's some great stuff, Whitney. And I appreciate you being here and doing the interview and helping us through the clapocalypse here this year at Camp One Clap 2. So thank you so much for being a part of this.
Yeah, thank you so much for letting me be part of this.
Thank you to Whitney for being here at Camp One Clap. It was an absolute joy to talk to Whitney, and I learned a lot from her. And you know what? You totally should check out her Substack. Again, that's Genuine Knockoff at Substack. So genuineknockoff.substack.com. What's new at camp tomorrow? Well, good friend of the podcast, UUUN, will be here to talk about choosing a platform topic and writing a great speech. Don't forget, social media challenges are live for every day of camp this August, and we'll see you again tomorrow, campers. Oh, quickly though, before you go, make sure you watch out for flesh-eating bees out there in the clapocalypse. You know what those are called, right? Yeah, zombies. For Camp One Clap, this is Camp Director Wiley, signing off.